The likelihood of a recession and affordability are going to be the two main topics in this month's real estate market update. Hi, this is Andrew with the Andrew Smith team of eXp Realty. And this month I wanted to focus in on recession and affordability, even though there are a couple of topics we've touched on in the past, only due to the fact that I have been hearing more and more about them in emails I receive, newsletters I receive, and the news in general. I don't watch a lot of news, but what I have seen, there's been a lot of focus on the economy and where things are going. And if you've heard any of the videos or read any of the blog posts I've put out before, you may have a sense that, I try and block out the noise and just look at the facts. Because let's face it, there's a lot of noise out there today, especially geopolitical noise, just political climate in general. And I'm not saying, it should be this or it should be that, but we've reached a point where there's, in my opinion, there's a lot of things that are sensationalized, and not the whole story always seems to be given, and everything's an argument. I mean, if somebody says this, I'm going to say the opposite no matter what, just because it's different from what they said. But I digress. So let's get back here and look at the idea of a recession, because since the last update last month, I have heard more talk about a recession. And although nobody has a crystal ball, mine is fuzzy. It doesn't always work, and I haven't really met anyone that can predict the future very well. But the likelihood is that, yeah, there is going to be a recession. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, the American economy right now has been in the longest period of recovery in its history. It's been moving and growing extremely fast. So it only makes sense that that pace of growth cannot continue forever. There is going to be a slowdown. But it's important to remember that just because there's going to be a slowdown doesn't necessarily mean it's all bad news and it's going to be catastrophic for the economy and or specific to housing. As a matter of fact, there was a quote I saw just recently from Mark Housel, and he's a well-known financial analyst. And he said, the interesting thing is that the widespread assumption is that the next recession will be as bad as 2008. And while it's natural to think that, statistically it's highly unlikely. As a matter of fact, the recession could end up being over before you even realized it began. So he's just another one of several that kind of have a feeling that it's going to be a soft landing, so to speak, on anything that does happen. Now, again, speaking of recession, when is one likely to occur? I don't know for sure, but I can tell you that the latest surveys that are being done of the major economists are overwhelmingly pointing towards 2020. If you combine the results of the four most recent polls, it actually comes out at right about 50% believe it will be in 2020, and a total of 85% believe it'll be 2020 to 2021. But like I just said, that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad news. And the problem that we've got right now is there's been so much talk about all of this that it starts to generate fear and it generates anxiety. And that's not good. As we all know, fear and anxiety can make the things in our lives so much worse than they actually are. As a matter of fact, if you go back to 2018, that marked the 10-year anniversary of the official start of the Great Recession. So 2008, when the Great Recession was. And in looking back at that 10-year anniversary, Warren Buffett made an interesting comment. He said, fear spread like a tsunami in 2008. And when you combine that statement with a statement or quote that I have here from Ben Bernanke, that was the chairman of the Federal Reserve, his explanation in 10 years later, looking back at 2008, was, my results do suggest that in the absence of the panic, the declines in employment, consumption, and the output in the early stages of the Great Recession would have been significantly less severe. So, why do I bring that up? I think it's important to bring it up because with the political climate that we're in, with 2020 being a election year, and with there being just animosity going back and forth on all sides, there's a lot of sensational news going out or going on, which can trigger fear. And that fear can make things worse. So I just think we need to keep that in mind. But again, when the recession does come, and it will come, it's important to remember that a recession doesn't mean there's going to be a housing crisis. Okay? And if you actually look at the last 5 recessions, home price appreciation actually went up in 3 of those 5. So the pace of appreciation, homes continued to appreciate even though we were in a recession. So it's important to keep that in mind. And in the one recession that they did go down, it was minor. It was less than 2%. Again, national average. It was only the 2008 catastrophic crash, so to speak, where there was a significant drop. Now, with that in mind, when those same economists were asked, what do you think the top 3 triggers of the next recession are going to be? It's interesting. The top 3 were trade policy, a stock market correction, and a geopolitical crisis. None of them mentioned housing. So where's housing in all of this? It actually came in at number 9. So even the main economists aren't overly concerned with the housing market itself. But nevertheless, all the talk of recession and uncertainty, we go back again and it creates that fear and that anxiousness. So when you look at another survey and you ask people in the market to potentially buy a home, what's the leading obstacle to home ownership at the current time? 40% said affordability. Now that's really interesting to me because we're not seeing affordability issues. As a matter of fact, homes right now, except for a few very high price pockets across the country, homes right now are more affordable than they've been in most of the past 20 years. As a matter of fact, homes were less affordable between 1990 and 2008 than they are right now. The only time affordability was higher was after the 2008 crash when the bottom fell out of pricing. So it's important to keep that in mind. And the one thing when we look at affordability in housing is, Mark Fleming, he's a chief economist with First American. He made an interesting point. He said the difference between housing and other goods is that we buy housing with a mortgage. So it's not the actual price of the house that matters, but the price relative to your purchasing power. So think about that for a minute. Even though home prices have gone up, and we know they've gone up quite a bit over the last 10 years, does that mean housing is less affordable? Now everyone's situation is different. I understand that. But if we look at this overall and you consider where interest rates are, you start saying and say, okay, to buy a home today, is it more or less expensive than it was in the past? Now, historically, housing took up 21.2% of your monthly income. That was the historical norm as the percentage that the housing payment would be. Right now, we're running at 16.6%. So 16.6% of income is going towards housing. And that is likely to fall a little bit as interest rates continue to come down and the pace of appreciation has slowed. So, overall, right now, the look for housing is not bad. I am going to make a couple other videos, if you're interested, specific to the areas that I directly work in. So, if those are of interest to you, please check my blog at theandrewsmithteam.com/blog. Or if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, videos on those will be there as well. But, everyone's situation is unique and it's different. And if you have questions, reach out. Give me a call, 888-447-9650, or shoot me an email, Andrew at theandrewsmith.com. And I'd be happy to discuss your unique situation, your particular situation, and help you make some sense of what might be best for you. But again, overall, in closing here, I'm just thinking, let's keep things in perspective. Let's take a look at the data, take a look at what it's showing us, and not necessarily get caught up in the panic or the anxiety, or listen to those that are doing nothing more than trying to spread fear, because we don't need any more of that. Until next week.